Morning, everyone. Any questions before we start? Everybody knows everything? Okay, just a few notes before we start. So on the Moodle page, I just uploaded a QR code for today's lecture attendance, so please scan that QR code to record your lecture attendance. I just unhid the slides. And was there something else? Yes, there is something else. I uploaded a file called a list of project supervisors from last year. So I don't know exactly when the list of project supervisors for this year will be released, but a lot of people have asked me already, can I start looking for a supervisor? And the answer is yes, you can start looking for a supervisor. And that's why I put the list of project supervisors from last year on there. So this year's list will not be exactly the same, but it will be at least 90% the same. It will be probably 90%. Does that make any sense? Hopefully. So you can have a look at that starting today. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the projects. Everybody here is a project over the summer, right? And one of the objectives of this module is to get you started on your project. Right? That's one of the objectives. Right? In the ideal world, the work that you do in this module will overlap with your project. It doesn't have to. But I would say you're at an advantage if the work you do for this module overlaps with your project. Okay. So you work on a project topic of your choice, so you choose a topic, which I understand is very difficult. Right? Coursework 1 will help you with your exploration of topics and interests. So there are two kinds of master's degree courses here. There's the standard 1-year course, but there's also an extended MSc course, which is 2 years. Right? So you'll see these references to 1-year courses and 2-year extended MSc courses in the slides. Right, so for 1-year students, you'll work on your project this spring until September, and then for year 2 students, or 2-year students rather, you work on it from the fall until next June. And the idea is that you take on some larger project and go into more depth on a specific topic. Right, you get involved in planning and project management. You analyze a problem, or you try to figure out the solution to a problem, and then you design the solution, and you implement the solution, right? And you put it into context. In other words, you look at related solutions that have been tried previously, and then you relate your solution to the previous solutions. And then you conduct some sort of evaluation, like how can I demonstrate that what I did actually addresses the problem that I claim to have addressed or solved. By the way, if there are any questions or comments, please interrupt me. Question, your name? Okay, you have a question? Oh, you can't hear me? Really? Is it because everybody's too loud or I'm too soft?
Too soft.
Okay. I guess, is there anybody else that's having trouble hearing me? I guess I'll try to speak up. I tend to quiet down a little bit as the time goes on. But thank you for pointing that out. I'll bring a megaphone. Anyways, I do have a microphone, and there are theoretically speakers in here. Does anybody hear any speakers, like working or anything like that? Also, I'm recording the lecture, so if you do miss something, you can watch the recording as well. So this module is about research methods. It's designed to teach you how to do research in computer science and provide an introduction to the ideas in the dissertation project. It's supposed to help prepare you for the dissertation project. So how are you assessed? So for the standard one-year MSc students, you're assessed with 3 parts. A so-called project plan. You can also think of that as like a project specification. Then you have a dissertation that you write with supplementary material. And you have a presentation at the end. Right? And then for 2-year master's students, it's the same thing. You have the plan. You have an interim report, you have a presentation, so these 2 presentations are the same. Dissertation is the same, and then a supplementary research paper is added onto that. And by the way, some of you may have noticed on Moodle, I've added some dissertations to this week's lecture, so you can see examples of 2 good ones and 1 not good one, right, on there. And I've labeled them. Right, a lot of you are taking modules, right? You're all taking modules for your master's degree. And these are the different modules associated with your projects, right? So you have your standard 1-year master's in computer science. Then you have these more specialized modules, like a specialization in artificial intelligence, right? You can have a specialization in human-computer interaction, or a specialization in data science, cyber-physical systems. These are all the 1-year specializations. And then you can have the 2-year specializations, right, which are the same things. This is the standard MSc over 2 years. And then you have, again, the AI appearing and the cyber-physical systems, right? So this lecture is mostly about the material on the Moodle page, which covers the project, all of the project modules, right? These ones, 4031, 4026, 4003, and so on. And the student handbook section. So there is a student handbook that you can refer to with information about your dissertations, deadlines, assessments, and those sorts of things. Okay, so here's a timeline of what's to come, or an approximate timeline of what to expect and when to expect it. So sometime in February or March, the list of supervisors for this year will be released. In the meantime, you have the list from last year to look at. And then in the March-April timeframe, you actually try to find a supervisor and agree on someone that's going to supervise you. And then sometime between April and June, you start the project. Some students start in April, and I find that they do better. And then some students start in June, and I don't think they do as well. So when you actually start is up to you, right? But the earlier you start, the better. I've never heard a student say, I wish I had started later. That's never happened in the history of this university. But I've heard many people say, I wish I had started earlier. Okay, there's this so-called preliminary ethics checklist. That's a form that you fill out and submit in June. There's a copy of that on Moodle already. There's a full ethics form if necessary. Usually that's not necessary. Then in July you submit a project plan worth 10% of your project. The dissertation is worth 80% and the presentations are worth 10%. Any questions about that timeline? So don't book your flight tickets until you know the day of your presentation. Yeah. And this is for the 2-year, this is the timeline for 2-year students called the Enhanced MSc degree. So the first, this is the same. The project start is usually in September, although that can also be earlier if you want, depending on your relationship with your supervisor. And then you have the checklist of ethics, same thing. Project plan is in October. You have this other document, it's an interim report, really. It's like a progress report, like what have I done on my project so far. Then presentations are given already in January, which is unusual. And then the final dissertation is due in June, and a research paper. So a research paper is like an 8-page document. So it's like an 8-page summary of your thesis. With the quality of the exposition should be a little bit higher, right, than a dissertation. So what is a project? You can think of your modules as breadth. For some reason I really like this terminology. You can think of your modules as breadth. You explore several topics to like a not so deep way, in a not so deep fashion. And then you can think of your project as choosing one direction to go more in depth. So you learn more about that topic at a deeper level, right? So it's some substantial piece of work and an application. It draws on the knowledge and skills that you develop in the modules. So I put in the word breadth. So you can think of the modules as breadth and then go into depth on a chosen topic. And then you show an understanding of that topic within the context of computer science, right? Within the context of the work that's been published on this topic previously. So a typical project, you think of some idea, a question, a hypothesis, a problem, and you try to articulate it, right, in a few sentences, like I have this idea and it solves this problem, or I have this hypothesis for this reason, Gesundheit, and you try to articulate it. Now, I remember when I was a master's student sitting there and not having any idea, like no idea what I should be working on or solving or what problem existed. So if you're in that situation, don't be too shocked. That's partially what a supervisor is for. All the staff here are very familiar with unsolved problems, hypotheses that could be tested, and questions that remain open. Right? All the staff here are very, very familiar with those concepts, so they can give you suggestions. I think the most important thing for you guys is to choose a topic you think is interesting. This is really what you want to be thinking about. Like, what topic do I think is interesting, right? So then you examine existing approaches. So you find out, like, okay, has anybody worked on this problem before me? Has anybody tested this hypothesis already? And if they did, how did they do it and what did they do? And we're going to learn about that in this module, like how do I find out about previous literature on this topic or testing this hypothesis. And then typically, not always, you develop software that tries to test a hypothesis or solve a problem or answer a question, right, that you formulated. It's not always true, but that's typically. It could also be like a user experiment. You set up some sort of experiment. For some people, it might be deriving a proof, some sort of proof in a kind of specialized programming language. And then there's some sort of evaluation phase where you're testing your hypothesis or you're showing the answer to the question you try to address. Or you present a solution and you demonstrate that the solution is actually working. Right? That's the evaluation. And then, of course, there's some sort of reflection and discussion, like how well does it work or how well doesn't it work? What would you have done differently if you started over, and so on. And then you write that whole process down. Right? Anybody want to guess what the most common reflection is? So if you ask a student, what if you could start over, what would you have done differently? Anybody want to guess what the most common response is? Anybody have any ideas?
Time.
Huh?
Time.
Time. Yeah, start earlier. I wish I had started earlier. That's the most common response. Yeah. It would be fun to interview students and then put together a little video to pass on to the next generation, like what would you have done differently kind of thing. Maybe I'll do that. Okay, so finding a topic. So this is what I said is something you really want to start thinking about. Try to think about what you like. What am I interested in? This is your kind of a question that you want to always have in the back of your mind, right? The worst case scenario is if you have a topic that you are not interested in and your supervisor is not interested in. That's the worst case. The best case scenario is you are interested in the topic and your supervisor is interested in the topic. Best case scenario. Second best case scenario, you are interested in the topic, but your supervisor is not. This is possible, but it can still succeed, right? Third case scenario, which is really not what you want. Your supervisor's interested in the project, but you are not. Try to avoid that, right? Avoid that scenario. That happens pretty frequently. But try your best to avoid that. And then the worst case is a disaster. Okay. So a list of supervisors will be made available in late February, early March. So that's why I put the list from last year already there, so you can start having a look if you want. Each supervisor provides a list of project ideas, right? You don't have to choose one of these project ideas. You just have to, you want to find a topic that's interesting to you and find a supervisor, right? And then you can contact supervisors in person or via email in the first place, right? And already start to talk to them. Yeah, about ideas. Maybe you have an idea. Maybe you found out that there's a supervisor working on topics that you find interesting, and you're like, okay, this is an interesting subject. I'm going to go talk to them and try to work out something. It is a negotiation process. And it's kind of, it's a bit on the first come, first serve basis. It's a little bit like that. So the later you are, the lower your chances of getting what you want. Yeah. Any questions so far? Am I speaking loud enough, by the way? Oh, okay, that's good. What a relief. Okay, so this sign-up mechanism is not open yet, right? That will be possible starting in March. So the sign-up mechanism is like you have a supervisor, and they have to actually write your name down and assign you to a project. Yeah, on Moodle, there's a special sign-up mechanism on Moodle. And there'll be some indication, right? So if somebody has a project with Colin, he'll write it down, and then it will show how many places are available, how many are taken, and so on. Right. There's an ethics form that everybody fills out. I wish that all companies in the world had to fill out this ethics form.
Usually, how many students plus one supervisor?
So it's typically that a staff member will supervise like 3 or 4 students, something like that. That's pretty typical, something like that. Yeah, yeah. Another question?
Like touch our supervisor before we on the choose the supervisor and then email to me.
No. You first try to talk to somebody. That's the first thing. So you might want to talk to like 3 or 4 staff. Have a conversation with 3 or 4 staff. Yeah, you cannot sign yourself up to a project. It's not possible. That would be interesting if that was possible. Only the staff can sign up students to a project. Yeah. But you can see the status. Like this staff member has 3 slots remaining, or 0 slots remaining, or something like that. Yeah. Another question?
On what criteria supervisor choose students?
What's your name? Iram.
Yes.
Very good question. I could give you different answers. So the first answer is I don't know. The reason I say that is the second answer is everybody has their own criteria, right? I think that my criteria are probably very similar to a lot of other people's criteria. I will definitely, so last year I had 25 students like asking for a visualization project, just as a warning, yeah. So I didn't supervise 25. And so like, for me, I will definitely favor anyone that comes to talk to me in person. If you just send an email, say, I want you to be my supervisor, done. Like, probably that's not going to work, right? It's almost definitely not going to work. Because if I see somebody's like trying to make an effort, to make some effort, then I think, okay, that's a serious person, right? I actually have to have a little interview list, like 4 or 5 questions, 4 or 5 question interview with anybody that wants to do a visualization project. And I might check their background to see if they have the right background for a visualization project. So probably that answer is going to be very similar for most staff. Like they'll have that. They'll prefer students that are ambitious and show their ambition by being proactive and talking, and not just sending some email like, I want one of your projects done. Sign me up.
I have another question.
Okay.
Let's say I communicate with two different
Yep.
professors and
Yep.
I don't like it and I don't accept it from both of them. How will I choose one?
You don't like either option, is that what you said?
No, I'll communicate with two professors on
Yep.
different topic. Like I'm not sure, like I want to work on this or that, but I got acceptance from both.
Oh,
of
they
them.
both agree?
Yeah.
You should choose one and then free up the slot. You know what I mean? Because if you get two slots, you're taking a slot from away from someone else. You know what I mean? So in that case, you can flip a coin. Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Very unusual, I would say. Very unusual problem to have.
So the best situation is that nobody wants you.
Why is that the best situation? Then you don't have to do a project? I wouldn't choose that route. So you'll be assigned to a random supervisor in the case that the process doesn't work out. So if you get assigned to a random supervisor, then that worst case scenario is more likely. That scenario where you're working on a topic that you don't like or your supervisor doesn't like. Yeah. But it should be possible to find a topic you like. Start thinking about, like, what do I think is interesting? That's step one. What do I think is interesting? Coursework 1 is going to help with that, by the way. Coursework 1 is going to help you explore, like, what do I think is interesting? Okay, there's an ethics form. I really don't like to talk about the ethics stuff. It just bores me to death, so I don't talk about it very much. Just, there's an ethics form, it's on Moodle, you fill it out. I don't want to, like, put everybody to sleep and, like, make them suicidal by talking ad nauseum about ethics, right? By the way, it is possible to get special equipment or special access to online resources that cost money. It is possible. There's a budget for these projects. But usually to get access to resources that with a fee, it takes a long time. It takes like a month or 2 months. So you have to start that process early. If you started in June, your project might be over before you get access to some special service or data set or so on. I had a collaboration with a company called Oakbrook on a project, visualization of bank transactions. And by the time the data came from Oakbrook, the dissertations were done. They were already finished. They were, like, the time had passed, right? That's what the ethics form looks like, by the way. That's what you fill out initially. I'm not going to go through it. So you'll typically have a weekly meeting. You can follow the minutes of meeting protocol during your meetings. If you want to do really well, then you'll follow that protocol. Of course, all the supervisors are also traveling during the summer, so you're going to miss some weeks because they're traveling. So what does a good project look like? You'll see also that there are some examples of good dissertations on the Moodle page. I put some examples. By the way, if you're really feeling super ambitious, if you go to my webpage and click on Teaching, and you scroll down, you'll find more examples of good dissertations in those lists. Lists of previous projects. So a good project puts the research into context. That means they've demonstrated that they've looked at the previous related literature. Like, what is the work that has already been done on this subject or this topic or the area that I'm working on. And then it demonstrates some competency in the design and implementation, right? It demonstrates usually some knowledge of software engineering, some implementation. It shows some level of innovation, right? Maybe some originality, and maybe something new. It's not a requirement to do something new, but it's encouraged to do something brand new, right? And it's kind of, let's say, more fun and innovative and ambitious to do something new. A good project has a kind of evaluation that's convincing, like really demonstrates that it solves a problem or answers a question or tests a hypothesis. And it's also written to a kind of professional standard, right? It's also well organized, by the way. We're going to talk about organization on Friday, actually, how these things are organized. Some top errors when doing a project: starting too late. Very common error or common mistake. Not choosing a topic that you're interested in. That's a common error or mistake. Not thinking about the evaluation. In other words, how are you going to demonstrate that what you're doing works, or it actually answers a question, or actually solves a problem? Like not demonstrating that you've solved a problem. We're going to look at Bob's project guidelines on Friday, by the way, not today, but you can see a copy of them on Moodle already. Not investigating the related work. I see that very common, like a very common piece of feedback I have on dissertations is, you missed the following related work. Very, very common error. Not getting help with the language is a very common mistake. There are lots of language assistance tools and staff all around you, right? There are software tools that can help you with language now more than ever. But there's also staff. There are university staff that are just sitting there waiting for the students to come, trying to help them with their language. If you want to find out about those people, on the Moodle page, you can look. It's under the resources at the top, like resources related to this module, and you'll see like language help centers and so on. And another very common mistake I see is using related literature as a substitute for actual progress. I see this all the time. So a student thinks, oh my gosh, I haven't made any progress on my project, I haven't done anything. So I guess I'm going to just present the related work, and that's it. Like, I'm just going to present the related work, because I haven't made any progress myself. So they might give a presentation, a 10-minute presentation on just related work. And then they pretend to run out of time, like, oh, my 10 minutes are over, I guess I can't talk about my progress then because I've run out of time. But all the supervisors know this trick, right? It doesn't work, right? Okay, so then there's the first stage is the project plan. So the project plan identifies the topic, identifies why you think that topic is interesting or why that topic is interesting. Where did the idea come from? What questions are you going to address, or hypotheses or ideas do you have? And then what is some of the related work on this idea? And then you propose a plan, right? Maybe you have a list of subtasks, like intermediate milestones that you want to achieve before your end. How you have some sort of a Gantt chart, for example. You might show dependencies and so on. You typically have like required features, like the absolute minimum requirements, and then optional enhancements typically in your project plan. And this is for the enhanced MSc, the 2-year students only. There's an interim report, right? Because it takes place over 2 semesters. There's an interim report which just shows the intermediate progress. Right? It's demonstrating that the student is working on their project and not just thinking about it like for months and months without doing anything. That's what that's about. What have you achieved so far? Right? What does the literature, previous literature say? You know, has anything changed? And how are you going to execute the remainder of your project? So there's a presentation at the end, or for the standard 1-year program, it's at the end. For the enhanced MSc, it's actually in January, February timeframe. So this is usually some slides. Usually there's some demonstration of the software. It's usually there's a video to supplement the presentation. And it's usually some combination of these things, right? For the students working on visualization projects, I always say, make a video demo of your software. Always do that. You don't want to rely on a live demo only, right? Because a live demo often malfunctions. So you always have a video demo, right? You might have a live demo that works. That's great. That will definitely increase your score. But if that doesn't work, you always want to have the video demo. So, and then in that presentation and in the video, you want to show the dynamic behavior of whatever you're doing, the time-dependent behavior. Maybe there's some interaction, right? You want to show the interaction in a video because you can't show that in static slides or static images. You can't show animation, you can't show interaction. It's difficult to show time-dependent behavior, right? That's what you want to put in a video, for example. There's usually a small group of staff and students there. And so you know your audience is your peers, right? And the staff. That's the audience of your presentation. And then there's the dissertation. So there's a document called Bob's Project Guidelines that goes into a lot of detail on the write-up aspect, right? How to write an abstract, how to write an introduction, how to write the related work section, how to write the timeline, how to write the design section, how to write the implementation section, and so on. It goes into a lot of details. Has anybody looked at that yet? Has anybody seen that? Not yet. So there's a copy on Moodle. We're going to look at it on Friday as well. And by the way, Bob's Project Guidelines are a starting point. They're a starting point. They're not the end. The end, your supervisor will say, okay, I want to see this section and this section and that section, right? So they'll change. And then the word limit is around 20,000 words. And for the 2-year, it's around 30,000 words. But don't obsess with the word limit. I wouldn't obsess with that. I would think more in terms of, okay, what's a good organization, and what is the substance that I'm going to put in each section, rather than I need this number of words and blah, blah, blah. It's more about the organization and the substance. It's not about the word count. And then there's assessment and feedback. So it's usually holistic. That means we look at the big picture, like the collection, the package that you've delivered, rather than really obsessing over the individual components. But the idea is we're looking for clarity. You know, how easy is it to understand? How clear are your objectives? And we're looking for evidence of that you did your homework. Like, I have this problem, and I know about the previous solutions to this problem. I've done my homework, and I'm going to show you what's been done in this area already. The motivation should be clear. And then the evidence of a substantial technical achievement, like what did you implement, or what did you develop, or what did you work on. A very clear set of evidence should be presented for this in enough detail. And then some convincing evaluation, which I've mentioned a few times. We will talk about all of these topics, by the way, in more detail as the semester goes on. So every one of these topics is going to come up again. We're going to talk about evaluation a lot, like different styles of evaluation and writing and so on. So don't panic. And then you know, it's up to the supervisor and then a second marker. So it will be scored by 2 people, typically, right? And then after 2 people have scored the dissertation, there's even an external examiner and an exam board where all the scores go through. So like a larger collection of people. Okay, and there's also supplementary material. What could be the supplementary material? I would expect in almost every case there's some demonstration video, right? Here's a little demonstration video of what I did, how I did it, how it works, the product that you've produced, you know, that shows what you've done. It could also involve the ethics form. It could also involve design documentation or planning documentation, minutes of meeting, extra test plans and results. A user guide could be supplementary material. If you conduct some user studies, you might want to have a copy of the user study in the supplementary material, like transcripts of interviews if you interviewed people. Maybe some video and audio examples, Java docs or Doxygen documentation for your source code. Has anybody heard of Java doc before? Anybody heard of that? Okay, that's a good thing to know about. Or Doxygen, has anybody heard of Doxygen before? That's also a good thing to know about. It's how those are tools that you use to document your source code. If you have a large data set, that could be some sort of supplementary material, right? Source code is typical. It's good to submit, like create a GitHub or GitLab repository with your source code, and so on. And then the research paper, this is for the enhanced MSc. It's usually a 4 to 10 page paper that gives you a concise overview of your project. And it's structured like a research paper, right? Coursework 1 is all about research papers, by the way. So you'll see what that looks like when you work on coursework 1. And then for for a very small percentage of very good or quality projects, you can publish those projects, right? If they're really good quality and you're interested and you want to publish something in a conference or journal, you can usually do that near the end. It takes some extra work on top of the dissertation. So it takes like the level of the writing, the quality of the writing has to be improved. Typically, the quality of the results might need some modification, but that's a possibility. And I try to do that with my own students. I try to take the really good ones, and then I'll talk to the students and say, hey, this is good. You could publish this if we do a little more work on it. Right? A lot of supervisors will support this. And in fact, a master's student from last year is submitting her work on Friday for publication. So a really good one, really good project from last year. And the year before, we did the same thing. Oh, this is one of the examples, by the way. So this paper is the result of two master's students, or three master's students working together to take their results and then publish them after they submitted their dissertations, right? And it was presented at a conference called Euroviz in Germany. So kind of exciting. So now they're very famous, they're millionaires. They can retire early. Anyways, that's the information if you want to see what it looks like. Okay, it's good to keep track of your progress, right? You'll use the minutes of meeting to keep track of your progress. I won't go into details on that because we're running out of time. Of course, there's going to be evidence that you've done the work yourself, right? This is something I don't want to talk about because it's also not very exciting. But you have to, it has to be your work, right? And any work that you use to help, you cite. You know, if you use a library, you cite the library you use. You make good use of citations, right? Okay. Are there any questions? Comments, questions? So if you can't remember anything I said today, just remember one thing: try to find a topic that's interesting. That's what it is. Yeah. Okay, you're free. You're free to go. 1 second, I just want to stop the recording.